Namaste, Swagatam, welcome to Module 1, Part D on Highway Transportation. Let's first do a recap of what we have covered so far in Module 1. We first talked about the importance of transportation sector to the economy, and we emphasized that transportation sector creates tens of millions of jobs. In Part 2, we talked about the transportation system and its components. We spent a little bit more time on covering various transportation modes. And then in Part 3, we talked about the evolution of highways and how important policy is for transportation development. In this video, we will try to comprehend some big picture statistics related to highway personal transportation, meaning we're not going to talk about freight. This graphic shows you the share of travel by various modes of personal travel. And bicycle only 1%, public transit 2.2%, paltry 2%. Motorcycle is higher than actually public transit. Pedestrians 10%. Get this, 83.2% car, truck, or van. So where are we going to focus a lot of energy? Where should we be focusing a lot of energy? Well, that's a $1 trillion question. I will just leave it as an open-ended question. On the left axis, you see here road mileage in millions, and on the right scale, trillions of VMT. Essentially, this chart is public road mileage, VMT, and lane miles from 1920 to 2013. Nearly 100 years of American highway, how it looked. Vehicle miles of travel is on steady increase. Even on this chart, you can see a bend in 2008 in vehicle miles of travel. So that means that recession is something. 2008 recession is something. So the lane miles is far ahead of public road mileage. Of course, what's the difference? The difference is 1 mile of 2-lane road equals 2 lane miles. So that's why you see miles is far ahead of public road mile. And this is the general trend. This chart is a consolidated representation of many highway measures of travel in one chart. This goes back to 1960. And if you see the general trend in VMT has been up and up and up and up, and it didn't go down until 2008, and then it started dipping. So is motor fuel consumption 2008, and it started dipping. Vehicle registration also 2008 and dipping. What happened in 2008? It's the so-called Great Recession started in 2008, and the trend is still down. And you also see in late 70s, you see a big dip in gallons per vehicle, and fuel consumption also dip. What happened then? Oil shock. And the gallons per vehicle is the only one that is either flat or down since late 70s. That's because vehicles got more fuel efficient since that time. This is the trend in fatal accidents on nation's highways since 1980, and in the red is the number of fatalities, in the blue is fatality rate. What is fatality rate? We will just see in a bit. First, the red, you see the number of fatalities, it kind of was flat from 1995 to 2005, and then it started going down. Fatality rate, which adjusts for exposure in terms of hundreds of millions of miles traveled, that is in a constant decline since 1980, which is a good trend to have. Now let's see what is the fatality rate or accident rate. Here's a question. There are two segments of two highways. First one is an interstate with a 50,000 ADT. By the way, ADT stands for average daily traffic. And the second one is a rural road with 1,000 ADT. And on both of them, you have 20 accidents in a year. And the question is, which one is worse? Obviously, you're going to say the rural road with 1000 ADT. That's intuitive, isn't it? That's because for a lower volume, it has higher number of accidents, and therefore it must be bad. So that is what we call by normalizing for exposure. What is this normalization process? It varies on type of accident rates you are reporting. I'm just using this opportunity to explain to you a very important measure called accident rate. Accident rate is nothing but number of accidents divided by exposure. And exposure is varied depending on what you are reporting, what type of accident you are reporting, and which facility. Examples of exposure will be for reporting nationwide accident statistics, where the numbers are going to be huge. We are going to use 100 million vehicle miles of travel. For reporting accident rates at an intersection, we normally use million entering vehicles, entering the intersection, that is. So this is an important metric that you should have an idea about, accident rate. If you are calling this fatality rate, there you are not going to say accidents, you are going to say fatalities divided by exposure. So that will be fatality rate. So who foots the bill for all that highway funding? As you would expect, all three levels of government, federal, state, and local governments contribute to highway spending. Direct spending by federal government is almost negligible, $2 billion compared to how much they spend in total. The Fed gives money to states. States spend nearly $109 billion of Fed monies as well as their own monies on transportation. The states also give some to local government, and that's how, according to this source, approximately $220 billion are spent on highway funding per year. I'm sure some of you are interested in knowing how highway spending is distributed among federal and state or local sources. In other words, which states get higher percentage of highway spending from this $45 billion pot of federal money? Let's see. Many southern states and the states in the upper Midwest get more than 35% of highway spending from the federal part. Remember, the federal government paid 90% of the stuff for the interstate highways, while the states only paid 10%. These numbers, the numbers you see on screen are for overall highway spending, not just for interstate highways. Here is another chart from another source. In the previous chart, you saw federal spending on highways was about $58 billion. Here you see $62 billion. Who cares? It's only $3 billion, right? Seriously, the data belongs to different years. And the real $61 billion question is, where is the money coming from to the federal government? Highway Trust Fund, of course, Highway Trust Fund. And where is the major source of highway funding for the states? Gasoline taxes, of course. How is the highway funding situation today? You're going to find out through an assignment, if that picture doesn't give it away. So what is highway engineering? It is engineering the road infrastructure for safe and efficient movement of people and goods in an environmentally friendly way on highways. And that's what this course is about. Just as you would expect, this course covers people, rolling stock, infrastructure, policies and procedures for highway transportation. This flowchart is essentially going to give you what we are going to cover in this class. All major highway investments begin with sound policy. The policy is the one that identifies funding. Planning then follows. After getting past the environmental analysis and preliminary engineering, the project gets approved. Detailed design then follows. The design must be for operational efficiency and safety. Once the project is in commission, there is a continuing need for operational analysis to ensure the project is functioning according to the design, especially in terms of operational efficiency and safety. So one more time, everything you see in yellow, to some degree, we are going to cover those topics. This is a brief course concept map for Intro to Transportation Engineering in the form of a short animation. Let's assume this outer blue circle represents transportation system. This inner green circle represents highway transportation. By the way, none of this is to scale. Let's say this transparent crimson circle represents transportation engineering. The title of this course would have you believe that This is what we're going to study in this course, which is transportation engineering. Because I believe in truth in advertising, let me fess up and tell you that we are actually going to study highway engineering, which is represented by this tiny dark green circle. What exactly are we going to do in this course for highway engineering? We will start with the big picture overview on the importance of transportation sector to the nation's economy, then outline the elements of transportation system, then bring focus to highway transportation, and then get into studying the elements of highway engineering in detail. First, we will learn about the elements of the vehicle and the driver that influence highway design, then put the driver in the vehicle, and then put the vehicle on the road and study their interaction. Engineer the road layout and geometry for the design vehicle. We will also study the behavior of traffic flow, learn to analyze the performance of highways and intersections, and how to design traffic signals. We will finish off with planning for the future travel needs. So before we close this module, I want you to put a thinking hat and recall your younger days when your parents were driving you around in your family car, and you're sitting in the back seat and then saying, "Are we there yet? Are we there yet?" Just kidding. So what changes did you notice in your lifetime regarding the driving experience? Well, of course, at 16 you probably started driving, but that's not what I'm looking for. So what changes? I'll give you an example. Your parents probably used a map and you are using a smartphone. So things of that nature, think about it. So after thinking through that transformation you have witnessed, I want you to think ahead. What do you think will be the future highway transportation, future of highway transportation in terms of safety, mobility, energy, environment, and what the future car will look like, and what will be the impact of fuel cost on driving? All these things. Keep a thinking hat. And if we are meeting in the class, we'll discuss about this. And I thank you for watching the video series on Introduction to Transportation Engineering. Dhanyavad.